Without securing the lives and property of its citizens, no meaningful development or progress can be achieved in any country. This explains why the president, Bola Tinubu, must place as a priority the issues of security. Nigeria has had its share of conflicts, from the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast to banditry in the northwest and north-central, clashes between herders and farmers in the north-central, and state of kidnapping in the south have kept security operatives extremely busy in the last 10 years or more. The Tinubu administration has a considerable burden and needs to lay the proper foundation to ensure that the gains of the past few years are sustained and built upon. Undoubtedly, there have been gains, but President Tinubu has promised to make security a top priority of his administration. Well, that should be the Bola Tinubu government. What would the Bola Tinubu government do differently? That's the question now. I'm being joined live in the studio by a former director of Army Public Relations, retired Brigadier General Sani Usman. Good to see you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Well, I did say, in my opening, we're still basking in the euphoria of Democracy Day, and we had that conversation earlier, and one is tempted to, when I see a retired general, tempted to ask the question of your personnel as well as your friends' experience pre-democracy.
Well, if you are talking about professionally, being a military officer, we have had the privilege of, seeing the current advent of democracy in Nigeria. Talking about from 1999 to date, when we had the election that ushered in democratic governance after almost 30 years of successive military administration. And if you are going to compare the two, I would rather, like the other day when we started this conversation, I was saying, for so many reasons, I would rather say there is no basis for comparison, because democracy is a better form of government than military autocracy for obvious reasons. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of the military service, as it were. I was telling you about issue of professionalism, regimentation, training, and even operations. To a large extent, in those days, it was more or less concerned about regime security. It's again democratic governance, where people have a say in how you run the affairs. Yes, I agree there are bureaucracies associated with it, but I kept on saying the military fared far better under democratic dispensation than in military administration. And I made reference to the issue of the procurement of weapons. And I was saying that, look, cumulatively, the military administrations have not fared any better compared to what democratic governance has done. And I made reference to Shagari administration, that it's not, if not because of that administration that was able to massively procure equipment and weapons, we would have had a hard time dealing with some of the security challenges, especially as they manifest in Boko Haram insurgency and terrorism. This is one of them. Then when you look at the issue of regimentation and what have you, there was so much suspicion. As a matter of fact, that officers hardly gathered for whatever reason. They will be suspected of, planning to topple government. And of course, you remember there were attempted coups and what have you that cost the military so much in terms of human resources. And that was carried over. There was mutual mistrust and suspicion, to the extent that you cannot even have a social life, going to officers' mess or going to warrant officers and sergeant mess, because they will be thinking you are doing something. And I could remember, even in some of the times, officers who, for whatever reason, they are not serving in Abuja, by the time you are in Zuba, situation report must have reported that you have left your station and you are out. You will start explaining, and so these are some of the things. And most importantly, there is this maxim that you sweat in peacetime and bleed less in wartime. So training is the bedrock of or rather of
I like us to take that maxim again.
Yes, you sweat in peacetime and bleed less in wartime. So invariably, the best welfare you can give the military is training. Because with training, you orient them to anticipate and deal decisively with security challenges. And if we are going to look at the asymmetric warfare that we've been fighting over the last decade and more, it was a novelty because Nigeria was noted for peacekeeping operation and other, conventional warfare. What happened in Bakassi, our exploit during the First, Second World War, what happened in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and some other parts of the world where we are able to restore, democratic governance and all the rest. But here we are. The enemy was within. And using sophisticated weapons but somehow the resilience and professionalism of the Nigerian military takes way to the extent that we are able to accomplish this much. And of course, it is not just the military, including other security forces, that we are able to accomplish this much that we are able to accomplish. And I dare say, this is by no means a great feat by any standard, because other developed countries have dealt with similar challenges and it took them more than 5 decades. Made reference to Colombia, and we are all living witnesses to what is even happening in Afghanistan as well now, despite the sophistication, the weapons and everything. But here we are, almost empty-handed. We are able to deal with the menace of Boko Haram, despite the affiliation with international terror groups like ISIS and what have you. And of course, the issue of the fact that there was even conspiracy of silence, in the sense that in most instances, the enemy is within. Unless you are able to see them, carrying weapon, you cannot distinguish them with an average Nigerian. And I will tell you an example. Over the weekend, I was in the Northeast, and I was so privileged to be among those Boko Haram that, that voluntarily renounced the terrorism and laid down their weapons.
The ones we call repentant.
The repentant.
Boko Haram.
Now, it was a turning point for me. Here I was, 2014, 2015, I was in the trenches fighting these guys. Now, I was face to face with such people. And they are ordinary people, some of them as young as you can imagine. I have the photographs here. So what I'm trying to tell you is that it was a complicated thing, and somehow the Nigerian security forces, the military rose to the occasion, and that is why we're having the semblance of the peace that we're enjoying. And of course, had it been that, we have not had the aberration of military incursion into governance who could have even fared better. Possibly in 2-3 years' time would have dealt with this, and possibly the younger generation wouldn't have even known what is called Boko Haram. So that is one aspect. Okay,
let me jump in here, because painting the scenario, letting us in what happened in early 80s, now talking about the Shagari administration, that perhaps projected and saw the future and procured some of those weapons which helped us in the fight against insurgency. Now, you're saying that in peace times, it gives us more time, the latitude to actually train, procure, and actually
and even think straight.
So how much of it have we seen? How much of the Shagari, or how much have we built on the Shagari administration effort towards, building our army today?
Well, apart from the aberration, during democratic governance, the military, to some extent, there were improvements in terms of doctrine, curriculum, training, and everything that you can think of. And I made reference to the transformation program that was embarked upon for 15 years, between 2000 to 2015, by Olusegun Obasanjo's administration. He wanted to have a compact army, and of course, through attitudinal change and so many other things, to meet up with the realities of the modern day, Nigerian society and, security environment. And gradually successful administrations kept on building upon that. And to the credit of the last administration, there was massive procurements of arms and weapons, cutting across the security agencies, particularly the military. And of course, training and other regimental activities started to pick up to the point that we are. If you recall, because of the issue of security challenges, we had to, for a while, put a halt to contribution to international peacekeeping operations, which Nigeria was noted for. At certain point, Nigeria was third largest troop contributing country in the world. And in fact, we have an internationally recognized peacekeeping and international leadership center in Jaji, the Kofi Annan. So there are so many developments. Now, Nigeria has started contributing to peacekeeping. So that to tell you that something tangible or fundamental is happening again. And this is to the credit of democratic administration. I can go on and on, cutting across the operational, administrative, logistics aspect of it, and even the welfare. Even though, just like everything else, there is still room for improvement.
I love us to talk about welfare. It's very key to every Nigerian.
Yes.
Because I recall then, in the thick of that battle, there were stories about welfare for the troops and the likes. So, speak to us about the improvement of welfare for our officers and men.
Yes, there were instances, a lot of, government policies affected the military. Take, for instance, the TSA, and, what do you call it? This cashless policy and what have you. If you look at the history of the military, in fact, when I joined the army, usually we were paid on the table. Now, eventually, you have to open a bank account, and now you will have an alert at every end of the month. So you see the tremendous improvement. But just like everything else, there is still room for improvement. When you look at how much is the take-home pay for an average private soldier or a rating or an airman or an airwoman, or even the police constable, vis-a-vis the rigors or the security challenges they encounter on daily basis and the high cost of things, then it is not even just about the people that are still serving. One of the key things, and sometimes I kept on wondering, when people want to join the military, they are always carried away by the glamour of the uniforms, the prestige and what have you. But one thing fundamental, that whenever the need arises, you will not even have any misgiving to lay down your life, which is the most precious thing anybody, any living thing possess. They never thought about that. And it can happen to anybody. It happened, a lot of our colleagues paid the supreme price, leaving behind dependents, wives, parents, children. How do you care for them? So these are the provisions.
Certainly, those are moments and memories that everyone would want to see go away or not repeat itself, and especially the widows and orphans left behind. And I'm hoping that the President Tinubu and his team will be able to do more. Now it brings us to the President, and he's just got his special advisors in place. And a former police chief is in charge of security. It brings us to a projection towards what may happen with other appointments like the NSA and all the things that surround security. Speak to us on what you expect now, because you've said we need to build on the gains of the last administration and the last efforts of your colleagues who were there. So what do you hope to see in this renewed fight against banditry, insurgency, and enemies of our state?
This is not just about me. I think every Nigerian wants things to get better.
Absolutely.
Not just in terms of security, but other socio-economic aspect of the Nigerian society. And to the credit of the president and the new government, I think they have started on a good footing and they are doing marvelously well. And one thing that is important is the fact that we have to cultivate, just like the immediate vice president said, we have to cultivate a new tribe in this country called Nigerian citizen. You know, devoid of these extraneous variables that tend to put us at cross purposes with each other. We should be working towards a direction that will give us a better Nigeria. So that requires a lot of understanding, a lot of support, a lot of dialogue, a lot of, give and take among the components of Nigerian society. Invariably, what I'm trying to say here, everything, not just necessarily the security, but everything in Nigeria is a collective responsibility. And that is why we vote people into power, you hold them accountable. So you should be concerned about what happened. So in a way, everybody should understand that he or she has a role to play, particularly in the security aspect of it. And the starting point is, let us wish them well. And if we have seen anything untoward, we are supposed to make it known. You know, there are relevant agencies. The good thing about it is that, look, Nigeria is fantastic on paper.
You know, speaking of which, you just said we have to make it known. I recall then it was your time, we had this collaborative or this collaboration between the army, the DSS, the police. Then they catch the word, the phrase, you see something, say something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I remember then Michael Mary of NOA was truly in charge with you all there. So how much can we build on in terms of social re-engineering, orientation for us as a people?
Well, there is so much to be done. I started by saying cultivating the citizenship. What makes America, for instance, tick? It is not even the weaponry, but the resilience of the citizen. Because an average citizen is a stakeholder in the project called America. And that is unless we also have commitment towards the project called Nigeria, because everybody has a role to play, then we will have, we won't get to where we are going to. Therefore, those in position of authority need our support, need our encouragement and understanding. And not just that, we should also put them on their toes. And luckily, you belong to the fourth estate of the realm. Practice journalism professionally, because you won't be able to practice in an atmosphere of chaos and conflicts. Therefore, everybody should partake in making Nigeria better, particularly the security aspect of it. And thankfully, people are gradually, moving towards that. But most importantly, the government has to lead, has to provide basic things. And that is why good governance is equally very important, because most of the security challenges that we're having in this country, to a large extent, emanate from issue of poor or bad governance. Competing for resources which were coveted by some group of people. And the needs of an average Nigerian is not much. He wants to be secure, or she wants to be secure. She wants to aspire to become whatever so they desire lawfully for themselves in an atmosphere free of fear and apprehension or molestation. That means there should be rule of law. But of course, you have to strengthen institutions that will be there as arbiter in case if there are contentious issues.
Quickly here, sorry to cut you here, because quickly here, is there a challenge you think that the government should address, help the military address?
Yes, there are so many. First and foremost, thankfully the president talked about reforming the military and talked about doctrine training. Of course, we have to improve on it. And I know that the military, they are doing marvelously well. Look at the training schools and the collaborations, exchange programs and what have you. And that is why hardly, I know of the Nigerian military, hardly you have a lieutenant colonel that doesn't have a master's degree. Hardly, I can't remember any lieutenant colonel or equivalent. In fact, there are majors with PhDs. So education is most important. Of course, not just in education, but training, the equipment, the welfare. But most importantly, getting the buy-in of Nigerians. But you cannot get in the buy-in of Nigerians unless you sensitize them and empower them, educate them on the nuances of, security.
Time was when you talk about the buying of Nigerians, then you were still in the service. It looks a lot of people as if you're not part of the society. And the military then they still do, the military civil relations. Speak to us. This is a personal one. How has it been, life out of the military, retired? I know you're a PR expert, professional, but again, speak to us. How does it feel like that now you're fully in the society?
Honestly, I feel good. And you see, the thing is that the very moment you go to the academy or depot, they will also tell you, as you enter, it is our hope and prayer that you will get out alive. So start thinking along that day. It might not be material acquisitions, but you have to program yourself psychologically. You come from a society, you'll go back to the society. What does it take? Yeah, sometimes, the thing about military, actually, it is more or less like a difficult one because you are more or less broken down and molded into a fighting machine. Suddenly, you are going back to start arguing, tolerating things that under normal circumstances, by the time you come out, in fact, mere seeing you, people will fall into line or they will do things without, cajoling them and all the rest of them. But now you have to queue up, you have to do all other things associated. In fact, some time ago, I visited a very senior retired military officer, and he would say, SK, come on, have you not one day felt like, putting on your uniform that you would like to go to work? I said, sir, do I tell you the truth? He said, yes. I said, look, let me tell you, sir, honestly, if not now that you mention it, I can't imagine. It has never occurred to me. And sincerely speaking, I kept on telling people that among my shoes, I no longer have shoes with lace, except one, which was given by me by Lex Max Banite because of his memory. I like to keep it. So sometimes you begin to program yourself to understand. And that is the starting point. But you start with yourself. Then most importantly, your family. They have to understand things were not the same. But of course, the society will expect you to be doing things. So putting it in my own personal experience, honestly, is marvelous. Right. In fact, I am battling with weight now, as it were, unlike when I was in the service. And I'm having a wonderful time, sincerely.
I think we're closing this on an emotional note. You mentioning Max Banite, one fine Nigerian who also helped in fighting insecurity in the country.
May his soul rest in peace.
Amen. I'd like to thank you for your time, General Usman, for coming on the show. We do hope that from time to time we'll be having such conversations now that you also lecture a whole lot of people.